The focus on unreached peoples can be seen by some, and maybe even appropriately, as lopsided in the failure to take into account geographic dimensions of the mission and aspects of fruitful fields versus hard fields. For example, if you ask, what should our strategy be to reach the world that's not yet reached? You should care that there are lost individuals. And if, say, and I'm thinking back a few decades, it was hugely fruitful to be in the Philippines because response was everywhere. And even though there were churches there, the manpower being poured in there could bear lots of fruit in terms of individuals coming to Christ and many churches being planted, even though you would never describe most of these people groups as unreached because there were Christians there. I think that's legitimate. I call that Timothy-type missions as opposed to Paul-type missions. Timothy moved from Lystra, his hometown, to Ephesus, not his hometown, and was left there by Paul to pastor a church in a place that wasn't his home. Be like me going to Manila, maybe, and pouring myself out in a church in Manila that's been there 100 years. I wouldn't call that frontier missions. I would call it missions. I call it Timothy-type missions. That's legitimate. I don't want to bring all those folks home and say you're doing the wrong thing. And it's legitimate to think in terms of geography. Are there whole swaths of areas where there's nothing going on instead of just thinking in terms of people groups? However, having modified the emphasis on people groups, I do want to come back and say its core, it's biblically central. When you think of the Great Commission, go make disciples of all nations, nations is what's in mind there, people groups. Or when you hear Matthew 24:14, this gospel will be preached throughout the whole world as a testimony to all the nations. And then the end will come, it's talking people groups. So I think at the core of our world missionary strategy should be an awareness of what are people groups and where are the ones least reached or totally unengaged, and who in our church will be mobilized to penetrate those.